Evelise Capó is a doctor of pharmacy and the executive director of Spanish programs and culinary content for the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. In his book, The China Study, Dr. Campbell talks about a 20-year project where he and two colleagues from China analyzed mortality rates from cancer and other chronic diseases in 65 counties in China. Using dietary surveys and blood tests taken from thousands of people, he concluded that those who ate a largely whole food, plant-based diet, avoiding animal products and processed and refined foods, could prevent, reduce, or reverse the development of several diseases.
The China project, it's unparalleled and unique in its comprehensiveness, the quality of the data, and even to this day, it has been the foundation to so many other studies and research.
In another study, Dr. Campbell and his team of investigators exposed a group of rats to a carcinogen and then divided them into groups, giving them between 5% and 20% casein, the protein found in dairy products. They noted that the rats given 20% casein grew tumors, while those given 5% had very little cancer cell growth. At 100 weeks, the rats given 20% casein were dead, and those given 5% were healthy. What may be more surprising is that when they alternated the dose of animal protein from 20% to 5%, the tumors shrank.
So cancer, it starts with a genetic mutation, and when exposed to certain substances, it can actually progress.
But we're talking about the protein found in milk, cheese, foods that we've been told strengthen our bones.
Fortunately, we don't need to worry about protein or calcium or other micronutrients. As long as we are consuming enough calories, enough food, we are getting enough protein.
A quick search of the USDA's database and I found 100 grams of kale have more calcium than 100 grams of whole milk. As for vitamin D, turns out our bodies make it when we get sunlight, while it has to be added to cow's milk. And if we are worried about osteoporosis, several studies concluded countries with the highest milk consumption actually have a higher rate of osteoporosis. But what about heart disease, the leading cause of death in this country? Doctors Dean Ornish and Caldwell Esselstyn have published several studies claiming patients with severe heart disease who switch to a whole food, plant-based diet without refined foods and processed oils can halt and even reverse their conditions.
So we saw that these patients following this lifestyle, they were getting better. They were reversing their heart disease, and they could actually track these numbers, and they did all the testing, and it was life-changing.
She says she's seen heart disease patients reduce and even eliminate their medication after a few weeks on this diet. And talking about prescription medication, I learned 45.8% of Americans take at least one pill a day. 24% take at least 3. The most commonly prescribed drugs include cholesterol-lowering medications, beta blockers for hypertension, and diabetes medications. All drugs meant to address symptoms, not the cause of the disease.
I would say a couple of years into the disease, I was taking about 12 medications. I had a pill box that I would travel with.
Dr. Sarai Stancic says she gained first-hand knowledge of the prescription drug issue when she became a patient in 1995.
Third-year medical resident, and I was on call, working an overnight shift. And it was a really busy night, running from emergency room to the ICU, back to the general ward, and I found myself around mid-morning hours, 3 o'clock in the morning. I had a little bit of time to go take a nap. I made my way back to the on-call room, and I was feeling so tired, something I had never experienced before. The minute my head hit that pillow, I was out. And then about 30 minutes later, I was paged by the nurse, and when I tried to get up to answer the call, I couldn't feel my legs. Next thing I know, I'm in the emergency room. They're ordering an MRI, and off I go into this MRI machine.
She says she spent 2 hours in the MRI machine, and when she came out,
I hear the radiologist who is excited. He talking to the intern. He's like, "Go get the medical students, go get the residents," because it was like whatever. Bring them, because they have to see these images. This is classic multiple sclerosis. Look at this lesion, look at that lesion. And I'm hearing all of this, and that's how I learned that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And it felt like the floor had fallen out from under me, and I felt like somebody had kicked me in the stomach, and I felt like it was the end.
Multiple sclerosis, or MS, is an autoimmune disease that affects the brain and central nervous system. It occurs when the immune system attacks you instead of protecting you, damaging the protective covering of neurons. The cause is unknown, there is no cure, and many patients end up losing mobility.
Doctor comes in, the MS specialist, into the hospital room, and he says to me, I've looked at your images. You have multiple sclerosis, you have multiple lesions in both your brain and spinal cord. There's a very good possibility that within 10 to 20 years, you're going to be disabled and dependent on a wheelchair. I don't even know what to say. And he says to me, the good news is that you're lucky in one way, because the FDA has just approved the first treatment to slow the progression of MS. And you need to start that like right now. He said it was a drug that has a significant side effect profile that includes fever, chills, muscle aches and pains, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, anorexia, injection site reactions, depression, and suicidal thoughts, to name just a few.
She was 28 years old and admits that while she trusted the medical protocol, the side effects started testing her resolve.
And after doing this for a couple of weeks, I just didn't think I could do it much longer. And I called him, I said, I can't do this anymore. And then he said, no. And he reminded me of the wheelchair. And he said, listen, you have to stay on this medication, but I know what we need to do. What we need to do is treat the side effects of this drug with other drugs, of course. So when I couldn't sleep, I was given a prescription for Ambien to help me sleep. And when I couldn't wake up, I was given a prescription for a drug called Provigil, which is like an amphetamine. And then when I became depressed, I was given a prescription for Prozac. So you can see how over a very short period of time, these medications and prescriptions started to add it up. And despite being compliant with everything they're telling me to do, I continued to have exacerbations regularly, and my disease progressed, and I found myself wearing a diaper at one point, and cane, crutches. I couldn't feel my legs. Sometimes I could feel them, sometimes they were painful. It was just every day I would wake up and wonder what piece of me is missing today. At some point I lost hope that things could get better.
But that changed in 2003 when she says she came across a medical journal that had an article about blueberries and MS patients.
So I'll drop everything, pick up the journal, turn to the article, and of course I find a poorly constructed, unscientific study that essentially took a small group of MS patients and fed them a diet enriched in blueberries, and the authors go on to conclude that these patients felt better. It's not a very objective clinical endpoint. I mean, I was a researcher and a scientist. I couldn't believe that somebody had done such a study and that it was published. It was silly to me.
She admits while she and her colleagues laughed at the article, there was one question that stuck with her.
Could there be a connection between diet and disease? If anybody could answer that question, of course, I should be able to. I was a doctor, right? And I 4 years of medical school, 4 years of internal medicine residency, and then another 2 years as a subspecialist. And I couldn't think of any examples in which any of my professors, mentors, or educators ever connected those two dots between diet and disease.
In our next episode, see what Dr. Stancic found when she began investigating that connection and how she says that saved her life.